Welcome to the Ethical Humanist Society of the Triangle. Thank you for coming out to our meeting today. I am Maura Bright, a member of the board. My husband Fred was actually supposed to be up here doing this, but instead he's doing exciting experiments. So you're just stuck with me. The Ethical Humanist Society of the Triangle promotes the use of reason and science in the search for and commitment to living an ethical life that benefits all humanity. We believe that personal inquiry, responsibility, and accountability are the best bases for ethical decision-making. Our weekly forums seek to broaden our understanding of ethics and human nature, and our congregational community encourages us to share diverse opinions, friendship, and camaraderie. We welcome everyone to share in this journey. If you'd like more information about our community, please let me know following the platform, or indeed anyone on the board. We have a visitor sign-in sheet and some literature at the readers table that we hope you'll find helpful. Because we are a community, we do share joys and concerns, which is what we will do right now. And
testing.
Hello. I brought two friends with me today, Vicky and Bibby, and they're friendly, kind, intelligent. So say hello to them.
thank you very much. Anybody? Any joys and concerns? Wave your hand. Well, since I have the microphone, I have all the power. Smart woman.
My joy is that we have clean air to breathe. And most of us can find enough food to eat. And we also have water to bathe in, which is a godsend. And my concern is that we need to live with consideration for all the other beings on earth.
Thank you. And Chris?
My joy and concern is that early voting starts this Thursday. So please do go and vote, if not during early voting on the primary. I think it's May 17th. So that's one way we can help keep our air and water clean. And I won't go any further than that.
Gretchen?
Finally, my nieces and her husband got the permits all done for their house, and they'll be breaking ground. The builder's promises in the next week or two. They've promised it'll be 150 days, though they're averaging 120. So hopefully be done by September. So it'll be great to have them right next door.
And Mike, is this a joy, concern, or is it an announcement?
Are we cooking at the shelter this Thursday? I heard something. Is that true or just?
I don't know, but I think that's for an announcement, so we're going to wait on that one. Any other joys and concerns? Blue.
My daughter sent me a couple text messages of her doing some voiceover character things. So if anybody wants to see any of that afterwards, I've got it on my phone.
That's actually a very cool joy. My concern is that on Easter Sunday, we went, Fred and I, to his parents' house, and we had a dinner with them, and that part was nice. They're both in their late 80s. And his mom decided to fall right in front of us and scared all of us. She seems to be okay. I was with his parents at the doctor the next day, and she had no obvious displaced fractures in her shoulder or her knees, but she has osteopenia, the thinning of the bones. So if she had little microfractures, there's no way for them to know. So that's a little scary. But the joy is, so far, she seems to be doing much better. Anybody, anything? Other joy is it's a gorgeous day, and we'll go from there. I have to look at my cheat sheet. Opening words. That would be John.
Well, in keeping with today's theme, and because this past Friday was Earth Day, I'd like to say a little bit about the history of Earth Day, because it's sort of interesting to me since it was started by a well-known politician in my home state of Wisconsin. And that politician is a Democrat by the name of Gaylord Nelson. He's since passed away, but let me say a little bit about how Earth Day came about. Nelson served two terms as governor of Wisconsin, and it was here where he started his environmental legacy and earned the title the conservation governor. In 1962, Nelson was elected to the US Senate, and for 18 years worked to bring environmental issues to the national stage. His idea came about as follows. In the 60s, Nelson was intrigued by how successful the anti-war teach-ins were on mobilizing college students to protest the Vietnam War. The senator wanted to harness the energy from the anti-war movement to raise the public's awareness about environmental issues. Nelson envisioned a national teach-in on the environment that could put these issues in the national spotlight and on the political agenda. So he went out and he hired Dennis Hayes, a former intern of his, to be the national coordinator of the teach-in. Dennis then built a staff of 85 to promote events across the country. Nelson also established a steering committee of scientists, academics, environmentalists, and students. And he persuaded California Congressman Pete McCluskey, a conservation-minded Republican, to serve as his co-chair. So the first Earth Day was 1970. Americans marched and demonstrated in the streets for a healthy, sustainable environment in massive rallies across the US. It was estimated that 20 million people from 10,000 elementary schools, 2,000 colleges, and 1,000 communities participated that day. It's rumored that the day was picked, April 22nd, was picked because it fell between college spring breaks and final exams. So not only was the first Earth Day quite successful, but Republicans and Democrats from all demographics came together. Union members, farmers, scientists, politicians, all came together to support the environment. Even more impressive, if you think that this was 1970, all this organizing was done with no emails, no cell phones, no internet, not even any fax machines. So it was all done pretty much via telephone. This makes the success of the first Earth Day even more incredible. So the aftermath of that first Earth Day, there have been several, but let me mention that Senator Nelson's idea worked. The first Earth Day gave environmental issues national and political attention. It influenced the creation of the US Environmental Protection Agency and numerous laws that protect our environment, including the Clean Air Act, the Water Quality Improvement Act, Water Pollution and Control Act amendments, the Resource Recovery Act, the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, the Toxic Substances Control Act, the Occupational Safety and Health Act, the Federal Environment Pesticide Control Act, the Endangered Species Act, the Safe Drinking Water Act, the Federal Land Policy and Management Act, and finally, the Surface Mining Control and Reclamation Act. So a lot of good stuff came out of Nelson's work. Gaylord Nelson died in July of 2005, but his legacy lives on. The first Earth Day started a movement of people whose common goal is keeping our planet healthy. Today, it's estimated that Earth Day is celebrated by over 1 billion people worldwide. So politics did some good at one time in our past anyway. And that's it.
That was really cool. Let's see. So today we are very fortunate to have Rachel Velez and Christine Diaz of Clean Water for North Carolina here to speak about developing the community toolkit, a grassroots approach to meaningful environmental advocacy. Clean Water for North Carolina is a non-profit organization centered on community-based environmental justice. Here's a brief description of their mission, which I liberated from their website: to promote clean, safe water and environments and empowered, just communities for all North Carolinians through outreach, advocacy, education, and technical assistance. So just a little tiny bit of background of the two young ladies here. Rachel Velez is the program director for Water Justice. She spent most of her adult life living abroad and working on various public health projects, specifically focused on water and sanitation access and affordability. After graduating with her master's degree in sustainable development practice from the University of Florida, she moved to the Research Triangle to become more involved in domestic environmental health research and the environmental justice movement. As communications manager and program director for our Water Justice campaign, Rachel plans to utilize her background in community organizing and program communications to further Clean Water for North Carolina's missions and goals. As you can tell, I lifted these bios from their website also. So we also have Christine Diaz, who is the environmental justice organizer and researcher. She grew up in Harlem, New York, and relocated to North Carolina to study at Davidson College, because Davidson's so much like Harlem, where she graduated with a BA in environmental studies and anthropology. As an activist and advocate for social and environmental justice issues, before joining the team, she worked on projects relating to public transit and accessibility, as well as projects involving diversity, equity, and inclusion in higher education. Christine's driven to support those fighting to address the many inequities marginalized communities face. As an environmental justice organizer and researcher with Clean Water for North Carolina, Christine does work throughout all program areas and different campaigns, including the Community Tools Project, which we'll learn about today, well user protection, Frack Free North Carolina, and more. She's also one of the volunteer coordinators, and she's based out of Clean Water for North Carolina's Durham office. So welcome to both of these ladies.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Rachel Velez, and I hope, is this distance okay for the virtual? Okay, great. We are a very casual organization, so I don't have a very tight-knit presentation. I figured what we can do is talk a little bit about our work, our current campaigns, ways for you all to get involved, and then we can open the floor up for a discussion, if that works for you all. Okay, great. So Clean Water for North Carolina, thank you for the introduction, Maura. We were founded in 1984 at a kitchen table in Asheville by a group of retired scientists who realized or who acknowledged that drinking water issues do exist in America and also in North Carolina specifically. Even as we speak today, there are thousands of folks in North Carolina who are stuck on bottled water because their drinking water source is contaminated by naturally occurring or anthropogenic contamination sources. So I will just skip ahead. Let's see. Did it work? Awesome. Great. So Christine and I are located in our Durham office. Since COVID, we have been pretty much exclusively remote, but we do have a Durham office. We also have our Asheville office, and this is our executive director, Veronica, our other program director for polluter accountability, Amanda, and our second EJ organizer and researcher, Shelby Klein. We also have a Northeastern organizer, Belinda Joyner, who's been a part of the environmental justice movement since the early 70s and has been with us since 1984. So those are our two offices. We are a very tiny team. but I think we are very dedicated in the work that we do, and we are supported by a network of alliances and organizations across the state, as well as some of the larger universities, including UNC Chapel Hill, which Christine and I are actively partnering with today. So we're a small team, but we do, and what am I doing wrong here? See, on my screen, it's not even on display mode. That's the thing. Mara, do you wanna? Or Christine? Mm-mm. Yeah, there's just a disconnection between the HDMI and what's actually happening.
Maybe in display settings.
Okay.
Oh,
Oh,
the
it's on
other-
two separate things. I apologize. Hmm. Okay. Oh, well, there, y'all are seeing something. Now we've lost it, unfortunately. So y'all can take a look at my email real quick. And I will try and pull it up. Let's do this. All right. Oh, yeah. It's doing the HDMI thing again. Let's see. Here we go. Okay, beautiful. Sorry. And I will just not look at the screen because it's not here, but I'll look here. Anyways, like I was saying, we are a very tiny staff, but we do try to tackle as many environmental justice issues as we can. So our three main program areas are polluter accountability, water justice, which I direct, and then community empowerment, which is pretty much cross program. All of our program areas and campaigns do incorporate some aspect of community empowerment. Some of these terms and issues might be familiar to you. Topics that I've worked on specifically is the threat of fracking in North Carolina. So fracking is legal in North Carolina. There are a lot of industry interests in fracking exploration in Lee and Chatham County, so not too far from where we are now. Fortunately, our organization did have somewhat of a legal win when we worked with other folks and the Duke Law School to make it pretty much impossible or extremely difficult, time consuming and expensive for oil and gas folks to get the application in to drill. So while fracking is still legal today in North Carolina, we have yet to see one application be successfully submitted, completed, and reviewed. So that is somewhat of a plus. However, Christine and I do participate in the Oil and Gas Commission meetings at DEQ. And interestingly enough, the newest push is fracking for hydrogen, which they are trying to actively accomplish in North Carolina. So that's something that we are watchdogging. Other issues, pipeline, animal waste to energy, biogas is a huge topic that I think y'all have heard in North Carolina. We are not opposed to biogas generally, but we are opposed to directed biogas programs. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But I work on privatized water, anything well user protection. I'm also in charge of as well, and also supported by Christine. And then we'll talk more about community empowerment as we go along. So what makes our organization unique from the dozens, if not hundreds of other environmental organizations in North Carolina is that our work is grounded in environmental justice. So we prioritize environmental issues based on the communities that are being impacted. So we do get a number of phone calls or emails, folks saying, can you come test our water? Or we have questions, or we like help organizing. We definitely don't ignore any folks that contact us, but we prioritize our work, our energy, and our funding money, our grants, into working with Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities, specifically lower income and rural communities in Eastern North Carolina, Robeson County. We do a lot of work with the Lumbee tribe down there. And Belinda Joyner, our Northeastern organizer, lives in Garysburg in Northampton County, which has so many polluting industries in one little pocket of area. It's a really hyper acute example of environmental injustices. But again, we'll talk more about that. But just to say that we are grounded in the principles of environmental justice, and that's what makes Clean Water for North Carolina a little unique. So what do we mean when we talk about environmental injustices? So as I mentioned before, currently right now, as we speak, thousands of North Carolinians are stuck on bottled water because their water is contaminated. This is an example of something that happened back in 2014 with Duke Energy's power plant near Eden, just north of us. I'm sure y'all are familiar with this, but basically a pipe burst at the power plant, the pipe that was discharging all the coal ash into a pit. Groups for decades saw that something was going to happen because the pits are unlined, which means it's just soil holding coal ash, which is, full of heavy toxic metals, arsenic, so on and so forth. Not only that, but they are not capped. So it was literally like someone went in their backyard, dug a hole, and put coal ash in it. And that's what Duke Energy has been doing and was doing up until late 2019. So on this day, a pipe burst and discharged 27 million gallons. And this is estimated because we don't even know the full number yet. 27 million gallons of coal ash wastewater into the Dan River. On that day, Duke Energy made a public statement and said, we have under control. Dan River is not a drinking water source. It's fine. That was a blatant lie because the Dan River is a primary drinking water source for almost 100,000 folks in Virginia. So since this day, Clean Water for North Carolina was actively involved with groups across the state, including folks in Virginia. So just in 2019, we did reach a settlement with Duke Energy, which required them to fully excavate all the coal ash in North Carolina at their power plants and cap and pretty much cement over the pits and ensure or try to ensure that no more groundwater contamination would happen in the future or something like this wouldn't happen. Question: you can't just get rid of coal ash. So what's going to happen to it? Unfortunately, other communities will now be receiving our coal ash. So this is an environmental justice that will perpetuate beyond the settlement that we achieved and beyond North Carolina boundaries. So unfortunately, North Carolina coal ash is now being excavated, but it will be dumped in someone else's backyard. And another example of environmental injustices are CAFOs, confined animal feeding operations, so industrialized animal operations. And I'm going to popcorn over to Christine so she can talk a little more about this.
Hello, everyone. Hello. So yes, this is actually an image of clearly of some of these hog CAFOs. And these buildings themselves, sorry, I won't move too far away from the mic. The buildings themselves are the buildings that house the hogs. What you see next to them is the lagoon and the system that is currently in place in many North Carolina animal operations. So this lagoon includes swine waste, blood, anything that's left on the bottoms of these particular buildings. And they are also sprayed onto the fields as a form of fertilizer in a lot of cases. However, these places exist in North Carolina where people live and eat and breathe. So oftentimes what happens for these hog or nearby in the communities of these hog CAFOs is people will find that their entire houses, cars are covered in this stuff. Often there's a large concentration of hog as well as poultry operations in Eastern North Carolina, which does exist also on a floodplain and sees, because of climate change, a lot of increased risk of extreme weather patterns. And because these lagoons are not covered, oftentimes people will find all of their belongings are destroyed. And we're also talking again about environmental justice communities that have other difficulties going on, and this is just one of them. In addition, there are a lot of health impacts, as you might imagine, from living near an industrialized swine operation. Folks who live near them, a recent study came out by Duke actually that said that they have a higher rate of mortality from anemia, kidney disease, bacterial infection or sepsis, tuberculosis, as well as a higher rate of death, infant mortality, and other health effects compared to the state averages. Another example of sort of environmental injustice that's occurring in North Carolina includes wood pellet manufacturing. And I don't know how familiar y'all are with this. It is more of a recent endeavor, but Enviva, as well as some other wood pellet companies, are attempting to make this transition from coal to wood pellets. However, it's definitely a greenwashed industry. While it's touted as renewable source because trees can grow again, when actually considering the cradle to grave process, it does actually produce a more CO2 per unit of energy than coal does. And this is really taken off in North Carolina, unfortunately, because of the southeastern forests. And approximately 60,000 acres of North Carolina per year are clear cut by wood pellet industry. This increases climate threats and decreases climate resiliency, particularly in communities like Sampson County, for example, that has a bunch of hog CAFOs, an Enviva wood pellet manufacturing facility, a landfill, and all these other things going on. Particularly also with the wood pellet industry, we see a lot of bad actors. So Enviva does have 5, I believe it's 5 currently. They are looking to expand 5 plants in North Carolina. And they have also accumulated 5 air quality violations since 2017. There was recently a fire last year at the Sampson facility, which was its 6th fire at an Enviva plant in the Southeast since 2014. So along with clear cutting the forest, they are also doing really immediate damage to communities that they are in. All right, and as you can see here, biomass wood pellet production facilities are more frequently cited in environmental justice communities than others. And I think the next slide is about community empowerment. But a quick note in terms of what I sort of mentioned just now about cumulative impacts. So referring back to the environmental justice principles that Rachel had mentioned, oftentimes when we're looking at environmental justice communities, we're looking at communities that have marginalized populations. So Black, Indigenous, people of color, usually low income or tier 1 considered counties, which also coincides with other difficulties when it comes to capacity building and resources like English being a second language, or there's a below average educational attainment when compared to state averages, and in general, a disinvestment in communities. And so as a result, we do see multiple crises existing at the same time in these places, and often making certain conditions much worse. And we do see that a lot in the health outcomes from these communities. And while there can be very large communities, like an entire county that we can look at. There are also hyper local communities like just in Chapel Hill that are experiencing these problems. Okay.
That's great.
All right.
Thank you, Christine. And again, we're going to keep popcorning back and forth and just open the floor up here in a minute to talk with you all. But one note about the last slide, that In Viva plan is in Northampton County, where Belinda Joyner, our Northeastern organizer, lives. You drive to Belinda's home and you pass that huge facility on your right. You pass hog farms on your left. The Atlantic Coast Pipeline was going to cut through her neighborhood. So it's another example, as Christine mentioned, of cumulative impacts in one community. I want to make one mention about Northampton County. If y'all are familiar with the Atlantic Coast Pipeline that was going to come through North Carolina, it was actually slated to come through Raleigh and Chapel Hill. Local official, Raleigh and Chapel Hill has a lot of political power. I don't care which way you cut it. It is a privileged region. Local officials in Raleigh specifically pushed so hard against those plans at Duke and Dominion, and they talked with Duke and Dominion behind closed doors, that Duke and Dominion were like, okay, you're right. We can't, put a pipeline through these areas of business, academia, so on and so forth. So Duke and Dominion picked the 7 most low-income counties in North Carolina to cut the pipeline through, because they felt that those people didn't have political power to speak up and oppose it. They were wrong. The pipeline was canceled in 2020. So that was wonderful. But so I do want to introduce what we are kind of here to talk with you all about today, how folks like you and your families and friends can get involved in helping with all these issues that we've just mentioned. So one of our main program areas is community empowerment. And one of our main focuses as an organization is to help build the capacity of individuals to become environmental justice leaders in their own community. We don't believe that we have all the answers by any means. We never approach folks or communities from a top-down approach. We definitely want to hear from folks themselves about what they're experiencing. What expertise does the community already have? What tools and knowledge resources are already at hand on the ground? And just help folks organize, connect with folks on the state level, local level, and make real meaningful change. So one of the ways that we've tried to do this, especially during COVID, is we developed a community tools page. So there are dozens of national and state level publicly accessible mapping tools to help folks like yourselves and like ourselves just type in our address and understand what are the polluters around my neighborhood, what could be impacting my drinking water, my groundwater, my surface water, the air that I breathe, so on and so forth. So we've compiled all these tools, and Christine and Shelby have put together wonderful fact sheets and video tutorials to help folks understand, I want to get, I think my drinking water tastes weird, or a lot of folks are getting sick in my neighborhood, like what could be going on? It's just helping folks investigate potential issues. So I wanted to introduce one of these, and I don't know how to get to that if we're on this thing, but let's see. Well, I don't know if we'll be able to play it, unfortunately. No. Let me see if I can pull it up on our website. No. Mhm. No, it's okay. And you know what? I'm gonna probably go ahead, and if we have time, I'll go back to the video.
Okay.
But
So there should be one that just says EV guest.
Evie guessed.
All right. That's what it says, EV guest 2020.
Got it. Awesome. Well, we had hoped to show you this awesome video that Christine worked on. So let's see. Nope, it's not looking like it, folks. I'm sorry. Yeah, no worries. But we do have awesome videos, and we do have some materials here that'll help you access those videos on our YouTube and our website. So we have an ask from you all, and that is to help us understand what folks would like to learn and what tools folks would like to have or learn, or what type of capacity building they'd like to see in their community to make real environmental change. So I will let Christine talk about the community toolkit. And then we do want to talk about an issue that's happening right down the street in Chapel Hill that maybe some of y'all can help us with. So.
So yes, this is a screenshot of our current community toolkit survey. And so we actually had a community toolkit, looked just like this. And it's a wonderful book. Yeah, it's a wonderful booklet that has a ton of great information on what your environmental rights are, what is included in them versus not, how you might be able to find answers about, again, problems in your community. But it's a little bit older. It was developed in 2005, and since then, a lot of things have changed within the agencies that we work with. So we are looking to build a new one that does incorporate community input a little bit more. As Rachel mentioned, we are oftentimes partnering with communities. We're not coming in because we have all of the answers, and we want to leverage whatever expertise already exists and not have to replicate information over and over again. So we are trying to push this toolkit. We also will have a few listening sessions. One of them will be in June in Garysburg and Northampton County. We will also have another one in Durham that does a little bit more investigation of what questions people might have about their own communities and North Carolina in general, and how we can be of assistance. So yes, I think that is, oh, and we will also have a virtual meeting. We have not figured out the date for that yet, but again, we'll connect with y'all and hopefully you'll be able to see what that looks like later on. All right, and there's actually a QR code for this survey. We do have a smaller version and paper copies up here if you would want to do that. We are trying to incentivize some more folks to participate by offering a raffle included with your submission for a $25 Visa gift card. So you could be in stock for that. And thank you. Yes, so we were going to talk about this coal ash. Do you want me to do that now or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Introduce it.
Sure, yeah. So one such opportunity that you might be interested in getting involved in or getting more information about that the toolkit would hypothetically help you with is this coal ash waste site that is at 828 MLK Boulevard. Again, in Chapel Hill, just down the street. I don't really know where the place. Yes. So currently there is a police station that is sited there, but the town council has been sort of moving forward with redeveloping that site. Currently there is an estimated 60,000 cubic yards of coal ash waste that exist at that site. And the redevelopment plan includes apartment buildings and mixed use buildings and development. There are a few concerns that we have going into this, obviously. The site itself exists on a sloping hill, and some of the runoff could hypothetically go into Bowlin Creek, which leads into Jordan Lake, which is a drinking water source. Additionally, there's some concern for the amount of affordable housing units that would exist on this property. Again, as an environmental justice concern, we do not want low-income North Carolinians to bear the additional burdens over anyone else. Yes.
And not to cut Christine off, but that's a really important point, is that the town of Chapel Hill and the mayor, Pat, has specifically said the housing units that will be developed on top of this coal ash will be Section 8 low-income housing. It's another example of environmental justices perpetuated because, of course, well, it's a very subjective thought that I hold, but I don't think that they would have built luxury high rises on this site. I think they're building Section 8 low-income housing because it just works out for them. So it is a blatant example of a hyper acute environmental justice in a town like Chapel Hill. So just inserting that.
And part of those concerns are because they don't intend on cleaning up the entirety of the coal ash waste at the site before developing the property. They intend on putting a cap and retaining wall instead of doing the entire cleanup. This coal ash waste is not from Duke Energy. It's actually from UNC Chapel Hill's coal energy plant. So not a part of the settlement that was reached with Duke Energy as well. So we do have a lot of concerns about that. We are working with Friends of Bowling Creek, as well as the WILP chapter of Chapel Hill, which is the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. I think that's the whole acronym there. And hopefully connecting more with neighbors and community members to find out what they know about the site and making sure that community voices are heard in this redevelopment and their concerns are actually alleviated. So yes, we can, I think, open it up for questions now if anyone had step away.
Thank you so much. That was a wonderful presentation. We are going to do questions, that is true. But first, we're going to do a little quick thing. Reminder of the ground rules always, which is, raise your hand, wait for the microphone, one question at a time. Let everybody else get a chance before you do 8,000 other questions, because I'm sure we all actually have a bunch of questions. I know I do. But before we even start that, as we know, our society is an all-volunteer organization. We receive no money from any other organization. We survive due to your commitment to our common goals that together we can continue to provide a place where ethics and shaping a more caring and thoughtful world is our ultimate concern. So we pass the basket and thank you for your generous donations. And while that is going on, I'm going to get the other mic ready and you ladies will be able to come up here for this one. If it's easier, you can take this off. Might be. No, it slides out. There's two because there's a Zoom button. Let's see if I can get the video. Okay, questions. We have lots of questions. All right, we'll start with Mike and swoop around the room.
All right, there is the physical plant on Cameron Street makes coal ash, right? Now, I read somewhere that about half of coal ash goes to building material, and that's mostly concrete. Now, just down the street, I think, is that a concrete plant that's down the street? Do they use the coal ash from the physical plant? Is there any system in place to do that there?
So I think the answer is no, because in North Carolina, only recently was Duke Energy even exploring using the coal ash for airports, like airport runways and the concrete mixture. So I don't think that concrete plant would be connected. We can certainly investigate, but the airport runways is the only thing that I've ever been aware of. I just know in North Carolina, I know in West Virginia, it is used a lot in concrete mixtures pretty much everywhere. And it causes a lot of radon issues because, housing inspections can't pass up radon tests. A lot of the houses, concrete, coal ash. But North Carolina, from what I know, a question for Polluter Accountability Director, from what I know is that it's only ever been used in airport runways. But I can double check and follow up with you. I don't want to say the wrong thing. Yeah. There you go. I doubt it, but
Yeah.
Yes. Do you also work with the pollution of perfluoro carboxylic acids and its esters. We have plants, chemical plants somewhere south of here.
I'm sorry, are you talking about the Gen X issue with?
Yeah,
Chemours
and others,
DuPont?
Gen X is the one of them.
I'm sorry, yeah, so we did work in 2007 back when Chemours was DuPont on a settlement. We tried to require DEQ to require DuPont to cut emissions by 100%, their air emissions. I think that settlement has been reworked a number of times. I know EPA right now is developing their PFAS framework. So DEQ is waiting for what the EPA announces for the PFAS roadmap. But for our organization, because we are such small staff, we focus mostly on orphan issues. There are dozens of groups along the Cape Fear River Basin and coast, and even groups in Pittsburgh and Greensboro dealing with different PFAS, who are experts on that. So we, as our staff only being 5 folks, we haven't gotten too involved because that issue is being tackled by so many already. But we are affiliated, partnered with the Cape Fear River Watch and the Cape Fear River Keeper. And we definitely promote their work, but we haven't been as involved. So.
We'll do Marge and then Linda.
I was out for a minute. Did anybody ask about the hog farms and what counties they're in? And what is being done for the environment for the people that have to live there?
Yes. So specifically hog operations are predominantly in eastern North Carolina. So that would be Sampson County, Robeson County, Richmond County, Duplin as well. And there have been multiple lawsuits from environmental organizations that are partnered with community members down there. There's currently a lawsuit for the biogas development, which Rachel somewhat mentioned, but in terms of the lagoon and Sprayfield system, a big effort right now between the energy companies as well as the hog operations is to capture the methane that is coming off of these lagoons and convert it into, sorry, what was that? The methane, some of the gases that are coming off of that. However, it cements the lagoon system, which we saw is very harmful and does nothing to address the actual community concerns. So right now, there are a lot of efforts to make sure that the permitting of these biogas, the technology for the biogas, in order to make sure that there is additional monitoring in place and that there are places that people can go to for assistance if they see any problems. Unfortunately, in North Carolina, there have been because Smithfield in particular, but the hog industry in general is very, very powerful and allied in a lot of cases with politicians in North Carolina. For example, there was a lawsuit for hog nuisance lawsuits, which would be someone who was a community member who was trying to sue an operation for any kind of detrimental health or property effects. It's very difficult to do that at this point because of some of the changes that have happened in the last 10-ish years. I hope that answers your questions. There's also poultry operations, which does exist more so on the western side of North Carolina, and poultry operations are not regulated actually. So we don't actually know how many there are. We don't know where they are apart from doing flyovers and working with community groups to do door-to-door sort of counting of these facilities.
I can add to that real quick. Christine covered it perfectly. So on the poultry note, in North Carolina, poultry operations are deemed permitted, which means I can leave this meeting today and go build a poultry operation, an industrialized poultry operation, and not have to report it to anyone. I don't have to report my waste, my discharges, for dry litter poultry, right? So on and so forth. So as Christine said, we don't know where these poultry operations are, but there's tens of thousands of them. For hog, back in the 70s, 80s, there was a projection that stated North Carolina cannot hold or manage more than 250,000 hogs in the state at any one time. That projection lasted for a decade or so. So North Carolina was never supposed to have more than 250, 300,000 hogs at any given time based on the amount of waste that one hog would produce. Currently in North Carolina, there are, and I checked this today because I had to double check it, there are over 10 million hogs and growing in North Carolina. So there are more hogs than people. And you can just imagine the amount of waste that these operations produce. Those lagoons that y'all saw flood every time there's a huge major storm event. It's disgusting. So to talk about your health impact, you know, nitrates, nitrites, phosphorus, ammonia, all the leaching and air emissions, so on and so forth. These communities have to bear all of it. And hogs are powerful in North Carolina, so it's really hard to fight it. Yeah.
I have a question about biogas or biomass. I hear you both saying biogas, which I assume is methane, but on the slide, it said biomass. And I'm wondering what's another example of biomass besides the wood pellets?
Yeah, so biomass, we get a little too into the terminology, but in terms of biomass, it is predominantly wood pellet production. There is also a facility called North Carolina Renewable Power, which is difficult to say because they are far from renewable, but they also take dry poultry waste in order to convert it into energy. So that would be another example of biomass, the difference being the state of whatever is being what's the word for it? It's either a solid or a gas, and that's just the distinction there.
Thank you.
Yes.
All right, Jennifer.
Since you're on this side, I'll go ahead and ask a question. I just have a question about, community empowerment. There's so many large forces, as you all have mentioned, against these small communities. When you're working to empower them, what are some of the ways? I'm in my head, I work in healthcare, so I'm thinking, are you guys partnered with folks in healthcare to say, hey, look, these folks have more incidents of cancer, they have more incidents of this, in addition to just working with them to kind of make everyone aware of what's going on. All that to say is just, any insights into what you all are doing to empower communities in ways that we can help maybe.
Sure. So I can walk you through a typical example of what our works with communities looks like. So in North Carolina, generally, these huge guys here have to go through a lot of permitting processes. Luckily, the permitting process has to include a hearing of these days it's virtual, but usually it would be an in-person hearing. But regardless, there'd have to be a public notice that someone like this wants to build in your backyard. There'd have to be a draft permit that the public can review, notes from DEQ, hearing information, so on and so forth. So what our organization does is we watchdog the permitting applications on DEQ's website, or communities will inform us that, hey, we're hearing whispers, this guy wants to build XYZ. So after we are notified that an industry wants to construct, and after we investigate the community and the area and the demographics, and we realize, this is an EJ issue, these folks are somewhat aware of what's happening. Because a lot of times people are like, hey, my neighbor just said there's going to be a mine here. Can you investigate it? You know, we can't really do all the investigation ourselves. What I'm trying to say is we'll get in touch with the community during those different, with those different avenues. Typically, we would then have phone calls or meet directly in the community. And before COVID especially, I was traveling across the state, having, you know, living room meetings or backyard meetings, or we would meet before a county commission meeting or a town council meeting and just organize a community, let folks know like, hey, if this is something you want to get involved in, we can surprise the big boy and come prepared to the hearing. A lot of industry folks don't expect community members to give testimony because the permits are so technical to understand. You know, people just don't have the time at 6 p.m. to sit through a 4-hour comment, right? So once we've connected with the community, we then try to understand, okay, do we need to bring in health officials to help us understand? Do we need to bring in researchers from UNC or Duke? A lot of students, like pro bono law school students at Duke, will be more than happy to help us do the work with the community, so on and so forth. So we do try to make those connections. We try to get local officials involved, let them know like, hey, your constituents are very concerned about this issue. Please meet with them and don't just, you know, meet behind closed doors with the big boys and don't include them. So, I mean, community empowerment can take so many different forms, but we generally like the community members themselves to kind of create that form and let us know what they would prefer best. So I want to work with us anonymously because maybe they do have connections and maybe we worked with someone in Yanceyville, they're trying to build a huge mine. I'm not sure if that's going through, a silica mine. The person who reached out to us is an attorney in the community and didn't really want their name to be plastered in the media. So, you know, community empowerment is informed by the community, and we're just here to help with any technical assistance or organizing that we can.
So do we have a Zoom audience question? All right.
All right, someone in our Zoom audience is asking, what kind of relationship do you have with the Southern Environmental Law Center, which has an office in Chapel Hill?
Yeah, we do have a great relationship with them. They take on many, many lawsuits from many, many environmental organizations across the state. We're often a part of the same meetings, same strategy calls, et cetera. So we do have a connection there. And I believe that one of their attorneys has taken a few cases in the past 5 to 10 years on our behalf. So yes.
Yes, we were very active with them in challenges against the Atlantic Coast Pipeline. So SAOC is a wonderful organization, and you know, without them, a lot of the issues that we work on wouldn't make it to the news. So they're wonderful. Yeah.
So I have a question myself, which it may be slightly retarded, but you know, with these hog farms, one of the many effects for the people who live near them is they smell awful. And I have known from experience that paper plants tend to smell really bad. Do these biomass pellet production places, do they have bad smells too?
Yes, to an extent. More so, I think we've heard concerns from Belinda, for example, that the air is heavy. There's soot or dust all over cars and houses. It's very difficult to go out and enjoy gardening from her behalf. And then something that oftentimes these industries try to do is to publicly show support for the community. So for example, for the Northampton Enviva plant, in some of the first years of it operating, they donated a soccer field for the children. However, it's a little funny because it's not likely that they would want to or be able to play, especially with asthma. That's been a big concern in their community for children developing health effects.
Thank you. Atish, you said you had another question?
As you mentioned that many of these offending polluters are in economically depressed areas, Do you know if in North Carolina, any modeling has been done to show how these pollutes migrate into more affluent areas? Because they do migrate, the groundwater and so on. Do you know if any work is being done in that direction?
So if I could get this darn but to answer your question, yes, there are a number of mapping systems that we could access today that show demographics overlaid with polluting facilities and like historical change over time, and also would show the violations and for the industry, for example. I would love to show you an example of exactly what you just asked, but to answer your question, yes, there's a lot of research on this. In North Carolina, Warren County, we started the environmental justice movement. Not to say environmental justice started with North Carolina. The movement definitely began to an extent here in Warren County. So there's been decades of research about how environmental injustices impact certain communities over others, so on and so forth. And not to say that, in a place like Raleigh or Chapel Hill, it's just beautiful, wonderful, and everyone's, white and happy and rich. That's not what we're trying to say. But there are just more cases like in Northampton County and Robeson County, where if you look at it's the county demographics compared to the state, and then you look at all the industry that gets dumped on top of them year after year, it's hard to ignore an environmental injustice at that point. So, and I can keep working on that video if you want to keep answering questions.
I can also, I can give you a good example of how industries do target the less affluent, marginalized populations and communities in North Carolina. Very recently, there was a proposed pipeline down near Memphis, and one of the officials representing the pipeline actually said that they were cutting through predominantly Black low-income community because it was the path of least resistance. And this is sort of to do with the capacity and dealing with multiple crises. So folks, a big push in terms of our community empowerment program is also ensuring that community members feel that they have a voice and that they can be listened to. Something we hear a lot, a term is sacrifice zones. And we really don't want anyone to feel that they are in a sacrifice zone and they can't do anything about it. But oftentimes that's what it does feel like, that it's this mountain that is not surpassable. But yes, I hope that answers your question.
Jennifer? I'd be too chatty. I just to emphasize what you all are talking about. So my background is in healthcare, working in communities like case management, healthcare case management. I am certain that UNC will never release how we hotspot patients across the state of North Carolina. We have mappings that show like where concentrations of COPD, concentrations of diabetes, concentrations of heart failure. I am so interested to see if those overlay well with where industries are, because all that to say, the reality is that if people can ignore it now, but we pay for it through Medicaid, we pay for it through the uninsured. So it comes back in different ways. So, just to put a plus on the work that y'all are doing out there. Thank you.
What I can do is.
In the meantime, I think we have one more question here.
Oh, yeah.
This is an easy one. What does EQ stand for?
The Department of Environmental Quality. So that's North Carolina's environmental agency that oversees environmental permits. And it's got a lot of sub departments and programs, and divisions, but it does control air quality permits, water quality permits, waste permits, etc.
Thank you.
Go for it.
Let's see. hear it.
The mapping tool provided by the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality. The map allows users to view statewide and local communities with information about permitted facilities, hazardous waste sites, flood zones, and more. Users can select these locations and learn more about potential sources of pollution in their neighborhoods. To get started using the NC Community Mapping System, select the checkbox agreeing to terms and services and click OK. The map will show the majority of the state. At the top of the screen, there is a search bar to find addresses and other places on the map. To the left, you can see a plus and minus symbol, along with a home button to zoom in and out of the map or return to the full extent of the state. To the right, there is an eye symbol to see the map's location within the context of the entire United States. And below that is an info button, which provides an about section for this version of the mapping system. At the bottom of the screen, there are 6 buttons. From left to right, first is the legend button, which shows a label guide to the layers that are selected and visible on the map. Second is the facility permit and incident layers button, which is a long list of selectable layers visible when zoomed into a location. Third is the environmental layers button, a shorter list of layers related to demographics, conservation, and flooding. Fourth is the base map gallery, which provides alternative background maps to use, like satellite imagery. Fifth is the info summary, which, when zoomed into an area, shows a list of categories such as hazardous waste sites or landfills, and the amount of locations for each category within the extent of the map. Lastly, the screening allows users to search for or designate an area and then create a report of locations within that specified radius. From the search bar, we'll enter a location as an example of how to use this mapping system for your area of interest. Now that we're zoomed into a location, we'll click on the Facility, Permit, and Incident Layers button. To reduce the amount of layers visible.
I don't want to play the whole 6 minutes. I didn't know that was that long. But it's an example of a tool specifically for North Carolina communities to investigate what's in their neighborhood. And if you go to our website, you can search your own address and kind of see what's going on there. I live in Hillsborough, and I thought we didn't have much going on at all in Hillsborough, but we do have quite a bit of arsenic groundwater contamination. I'm not on a private well, but there are folks in my area who are, and this is naturally occurring arsenic, so no source, human-made source. But it was just interesting to use this tool and kind of see like, oh my gosh, you never would have known. So sorry if that video didn't work out.
Yeah, sorry about that. So for context about that specific tool, it was created by North Carolina's Department of Environmental Quality, actually as a result of a Title VI civil rights lawsuit when it came to hog operations. And there are still a lot of problems with the tool. They did not incorporate public comment in the appropriate way, but it is one of many tools that you can look at for specific or general some information.
Wonderful. Thank you both very much. I think we've had a bunch of questions. Have we got everybody to this point? All right. Thank you so much, both of you. I have to find my piece of paper that tells me what to do here. Up here at the front, we have some very nice literature that you're welcome and invited to pick up afterwards, just so that you can make sure you can get website information, any other information you're interested in. Yeah. So, announcements. Does anybody have any announcements today?
All right. So related to the coal ash site that I mentioned earlier, there is a Chapel Hill Town Council meeting on Wednesday at 7 p.m. If you want to hear more about that from the council members, I believe it's a virtual meeting.
Any other announcements? Yes, Mike. So Mike is asking if we're cooking at the shelter on Thursday. Unfortunately, I believe Amy Piersma is the person who generally runs that. And as she is not here, I don't know. So the answer is I don't know. My guess is no, because so far it doesn't seem like the shelter has let people back in. And I think that she would let us know. Let's see. Oh, as far as next Sunday's program, we actually have Katie Davis, who is also known as Gretchen's niece. And she has a reasonably new job at the North Carolina Zoo in Asheboro, so it'll be a botanical discussion. And I don't yet have a title, but we will have one very soon. Any other announcements? Yeah, that will be a live meeting here next week. We will also have Zoom for people who are not able to come, but it will definitely be live in person. And it'll be starting out our May with a really cool talk from somebody who was it Katie who was with you for the Antarctica?
Oh, yes.
So the woman who was embarrassed by her aunt showing pictures of her from the Antarctica trip they went on now has a chance for revenge. So it will be worth coming to. Gretchen said she's not at the zoo, but you don't know what you can do with Photoshop. You can never tell. So if there's no other announcements, I would like to thank Marge and John Holmgren for the beautiful refreshments that are hanging out there at the back. And Jennifer. Jennifer said, oh, Jennifer did also help. Yes. Okay. So all of them drew together. And Chris is saying something. Do you want the?
Dorothy wanted to remind us about the food collection first Sunday.
Next Sunday is the first Sunday of the month. Food collection for the kitchen. So please bring any goods that you think are appropriate. And Mike, are you still transporting those? Yeah. And Mike is still transporting them. So that's all set. And Gretchen, hold on.
We have a new change for change jar, but I forget what Dorothy said we're donating to this month. And I didn't make a big sign for it, but the jar's there. So if you have change, it's available.
Thank you, Gretchen. We appreciate that. And also thank you, Gretchen, for being our greeter today. Change microphones here.
Dorothy just said the change for change goes to the National Ethical Service for Ukraine.
Change for Change goes to the National Ethical Service for Ukraine. We had to talk about the Ukrainian refugees in Poland recently, so that's actually a really interesting thing to choose. In addition to thanking everybody else, we also want to thank our tech guru, Chris, who was doing the Zoom, which is awesome because he doesn't do as many flubs as I do. So I'm really, really, really glad he's back. And now we are waiting for closing words from John.
Well, I looked for poems related to Earth Day, and I found one sort of interesting one by a guy named Gary Soto. It's called Earth Day on the Bay. And I think he's referring to San Francisco Bay, but I'm not 100% sure. Curled like a genie's lamp, a track shoe from the 1970s among seaweed, the race long over, the blue ribbons faded, the trophies deep in pink insulation in the rafters. Perhaps the former distance runner sits in his recliner. The other shoe, along this shore, it could have ridden the waves back to Mother Korea, where it was molded from plastic, fitted with cloth, shoelaces poked through the eyelets, squeezed for inspection. I remember that style of shoe. Never owned a pair myself. With my skinny legs, I could go side to side like a crab, but never run the distance with a number on my back. Never the winner or runner, upheaving at the end. I bag that shoe, now litter, and nearly slip on the rocks. Gulls scream above. A single kite goes crazy. A cargo ship in the distance carrying more of the same. Oh, that's it.
Thank you, John. That was really cool. So our meeting is over, but our fellowship continues. Please join us for refreshments and please give a warm greeting to the person sitting next to you or across from you, wherever you would like. And we'll be back here again, same time.